Hi, friends. Welcome back. So, as I sit here thinking about what I want to talk about in this video, um, once again, I have to give myself permission to slow down my thoughts and feel like I can be completely at ease in my vulnerability at not doing this perfectly and not having the most um, perfectly thought out script to share with you. And I have to admit that it's a challenge. Um, it's a challenge to press play on the computer and start speaking and allow what wants to come out without feeling that a part of me wants it to be perfect. So, having said that, um, I want to just say that a few days ago, somebody asked me what my motivation was for doing this. And to be completely truthful, my motivation was to speak to anyone who has been given a diagnosis, uh, whether it be a medical diagnosis or some other form of psychological, emotional diagnosis that they've been told is uh, either unhealable, terminal, um, will have consequences that are absolutely determined that they won't have any control over. And um, of course, this stems from my own experience having been diagnosed with glioblastoma, a form of brain cancer, now over 8 years ago. And my motivation for doing this is to reach out to say to you, um, believe the diagnosis, but do not believe the prognosis. I think that's probably the most important message that I can start with here, because there's so much information on the internet and so much accumulated thinking in our culture, through our medical system, um, through our Western idea of what's possible, um, and also in the accumulated fears that we've acquired through our immediate families and since society that can have great influence um, on the way that we approach our own healing in the world. And um, so that's my primary motivation is is that is to say there's more than we've been taught to believe there is, and that more is accessible to us. And when we can recognize the bridge into that awareness that we don't know everything, we begin to realize that what we don't know provides an opportunity to engage with our own very being uh, in a way that is participatory, meaning to say that we have more influence in our own becoming than we have thought. So when I last left off the last video, I was saying very enthusiastically that we, in fact, are not living on planet Earth, that we are planet Earth living itself through us. But upon reflection, I think what I was really trying to convey was that we are an extension of the infinite, universal, um, invisible, intelligent, divine being finding form through the elements and ultimately through our physical manifestations as each of our unique selves. And the exciting thing about that is that when we pause to consider that that our physical bodies, our physical being, our water, our earth, our air, our fire, is actually animated. In other words, um, we don't have to decide to breathe. It happens on its own. We don't have to decide to allow our hearts to beat. They just do. For our blood to circulate, it just does. And that's not mundane. That's not nothing. And if we sort of reframe that a little bit, it becomes obvious that life is beating our heart, that life is breathing us, um, that we are being lived. And if we can approach our existence from that perspective, it becomes uh, clear that not only are we just here, but in fact uh, we are vessels for life living itself. The mystery, the great mystery of life living itself through our being. And in that uh, is a great privilege. And I think that, um, you know, many people refer to our bodies, our physical bodies, as vessels um, for the divine um, to work through, to live through. And I think of it in terms of also being a steward, so that if life is being lived through me as Jeff, then it's my divine privilege and responsibility to recognize myself as a steward for how I'm going to navigate how life flows through me and into the world. And that is so it's so humbling. It actually brings tears to my eyes. It's so humbling because it means that I have been invited into direct relationship with God, with the divine, with the universe, with all that is. And I'm using all of these different words to describe this experience because I know that each of them comes uh, packed with a lot of baggage that is tied closely to one's upbringing, one's religious connection, if they have one. Um, and I don't really think it matters what words we use to describe this experience that I'm trying to talk about, because ultimately, any of these words are only pointers, to that which is unnameable. Um, and uh, so my the emphasis here that I guess that I'm trying to describe in words that are impossible to use to describe this experience is that we are we are co-navigators of this very life, and in that awareness, we have access to our own power of creativity. Um, because we are created, and if your spine goes up at that, what do you mean we are created? Well, here we are. You're looking at this and you're listening and I'm talking and we are creatures. I don't think anybody can deny that. We are created, whether or not we have a sense of what the mystery is that has created us. But in our very being, we also can create. Um, we do it all the time. We do it with our actions. We do it with our words. We do it with our through art and music and the way we live our lives. We are constantly creating. So we in fact are also creators. Okay, now I don't want to go. I don't want to go off track. Um, so getting back to my initial reason for doing this, when I when I received the diagnosis, and as I had said in previous videos, I was sitting there and recognized that the most valuable thing, the most important thing that I had to do was point myself toward God. Um, I I knew that it had to start immediately, and I knew that everything else that I did had to be seen through that lens. And so, um, two things happened uh, at that time. The first was that I made a decision that um, I needed to change my um, my patterns of behavior, the habits that I had formed in the way that I lived my life, to be in accord with what I knew I had to do, um, and that took two. How can I describe it? Uh, it happened in two ways. The first is that I needed to modify my own day to day lifestyle. And the second thing that had to happen was that I had to start becoming more attuned to how I was living my life in relationship with the world. So let me start with the first one, and it'll be hopefully a little bit more clear. Um, my usual day to day pattern at the time would be to wake up early, to make a coffee, to drink my coffee while I was shaving, while I was getting dressed, to make a smoothie, to have, throw back my breakfast and rush off to the gym and get to the gym and be there before 9 o'clock, and um, as early as I could so that I could start work at 9 o'clock. And it felt like I woke up running. And I know that I'm not the only one um, that lives this way, lived in my case this way. Um, I think a lot of us feel the pressure to get up and just go all the time. And I knew that something had to shift, and so I started to wake up, and instead of rushing, I intentionally started to slow down. So I prepared my breakfast, and I sat on the couch, and I began to return to reading that I found inspirational and that reminded me. Um, and I emphasize that word because I think that all of this is a question of remembering who we really are. So I chose to look to books and to writings that reminded me um, of who we really are and what is actually possible. Um, and a lot of that writing harked back to the readings that I had done 25 years ago when I was doing my degree, um, and trying to convey through my thesis the truth and the reality of the interconnectivity of the universe. As I had said before in these videos, I was so excited when I first recognized that there was more to life than just our physical being, that the synchronicities and miracles were happening, and that there was something magical about existing. And when I first was turned on to quantum physics, I recognized that in that there was all of a sudden language that could convey this deep truth to anyone who was steadfastly holding on to the physical dimension of life, but had not considered the invisible dimension of life that I refer to sometimes. And I was so excited because I thought, oh, here's a scientific language that bridges both of these dimensions of who we are. And now everyone can get it. And if we can all get it, then we can all recognize who we truly are, and then uh, engage both with ourselves and with each other from that deep knowing that we are an interconnected unity, each with our own responsibility to live our lives authentically and fully, and share that with others to inspire them to do the same, and so on and so forth. So as I sat down and read and began to discover people who were sharing more about their own experiences, about their own spiritual dimension, um, discovering all of the new research since I had been uh, immersed in that all those years ago. It became clear to me that there are so many people who are trying to convey this awareness so that we can each uh, recognize that we are more. Okay. So, what I began to do is even before I woke up, sorry, even before I woke up, of course, I would wake up. And then, even before I would, um, begin my morning ritual, I decided that I needed to pause and begin to meditate in the morning before I even got out of bed. That's not entirely true. I would get out of bed uh, and pee, and then I would come back to bed or to the couch and meditate. How's that for vulnerability in these videos? Um, because I decided I needed to be comfortable. So uh, I want to say here that I have never had any formal training in meditation. I had read about it. I had read about meditation, and um, I knew that there were different schools of meditation and different practices, but I had never had a formal training in it. But what I knew I needed to do was direct my inner compass toward God, toward the divine, toward the source of my very being. And so what happened is that I would just sit there with my eyes closed in the dark and open, or try to open. And what I found eventually happened was that I could relax enough so that my body and my mind would slow down enough and release tension so that I could just let go. And what I found was that in that letting go, I was able to access a part of myself that was inviting God to come in. And in that invitation for God to come in, there is, and I say is because it continues, there is a humble desire to welcome and receive all the love and intelligence that has brought me into being. Now, it's hard to put that into words that do justice to the experience. But in doing that, in inviting God to come in, and in asking for help, something simultaneously happened that felt like I was pouring myself into God. releasing myself into God. And this practice began to crack me open from the inside and affirm in my own lived experience that uh, the truth of our being that I had been reading about and learning about and studying and writing about all those years ago, I was able to actually put into practice. And when I could do that, life felt different. I no longer felt that I was just this guy running through life doing my stuff. I felt held. That's the best way that I've been able to describe it so far. I felt held. And the more that I began that practice, and the more that I allowed that to flow over into my daily routines, the more it started to become more foundational in the way that I was living my life. So that in a way, time began to slow down a little bit. And I used to say that I was starting to experience the moments between the moments. And I recognize that that sounds a little bit vague and hard to get one's mind around. But it felt like a space opened up between spaces, and I was able to more clearly recognize what was happening inside of me within those spaces. And from those spaces, then make a choice about how I wanted to respond in the world or in my own being. And what would happen is that I became much more able to recognize times in my life where something didn't feel right, or where there was a possibility of participating in a thought or an action that went against the grain of my soul. As I talked about in earlier videos, there was always a part of me that knew when something was inviting me in that didn't feel quite right. If there was, for example, an opportunity to engage in gossip, um, or in participating in ultimately belittling somebody, which now I recognize was um, simply a need for my inner parts that had been hurt to feel stronger. I recognize that now, and I think I'll talk about that work eventually. My inner parts work. But for now, let me just say that the the recognition that I could stop and attend to the inner part of me changed everything. And that's why I decided to call this video series Informed, the Matter of Spirit, because I really, really believe that we can form who we are by paying attention to the inside, by paying attention to the inner realm that is always inviting us to connect with it. And the second part of the title of the series is The Matter of Spirit, because I believe that as a result of paying attention to that to that inner realm, we can influence our own matter. And that's just not me. And again, I am just sharing what I've learned. There are so many teachers out there, thank God, who are doing all of the work to prove through through science that our minds, our spirits, the way we think, the way we feel, has direct influence on our physical technology, our body, our inherent body technology, our own chemistry, our own pharmacies. Um, an easy example to make the point accessible is to say to you right now, think about your favorite food. Think about taking a big forkful or spoonful of your favorite food and holding it up in front of you. What's happening? The Pavlovian response. Huh? Your mouth might be watering. You might feel a little tinge of hunger in your stomach. So it's not hard to make the leap from thought to physical reaction. We all know this is a truth. We just don't talk about it. We don't think about it. Um, when in our culture we talk about spirituality or the spiritual, I think that there's some resistance because we don't have a long history here of having those conversations comfortably. They haven't been readily available to many people, whereas perhaps, from what I've understood, in the East, uh, it's a much more uh, normal way of understanding life. However, we have words that we use all the time, like invisible, invisible, the inside of what is visible. We use the word insight all the time. Oh, I had an insight. That was a great insight that I had. We throw these words around, but what does insight actually mean? If we just break it down, it means having sight, having vision into what is inner. Even the word imagine, which uh, I think is probably our most blessed tool, um, and what allows us to navigate how we use our minds to participate uh, as beings in the world. Imagine, break it down. Image, in. We have an image in. And then we have the power to bring it out into the physical world, to create from that place, to manifest from that place. Imagine, image in. We talk about the infinite. In the finite. So we can think about uh, our physical world, our physical manifestation, as being a continual series of finalities, right? Things are born and then they die. And from that death comes new birth. Um, Things begin and then they end. This is the cycle of life. It may not be comfortable to talk about, but it is. And the word infinite, we can't really get our minds around. Um, but we do know that within the finite, in that, there is some stream that is informing everything that is. Um, so, in. Uh, Informed becomes then, with intention, um, the matter of our spirit. Okay, so with that, um, I'm going to pause and I'll just end by saying that uh, having had access to that awareness allowed me to begin to navigate my life in a way that positioned me in alignment with my soul, uh, so that I was less being moved by what my ego personality was requesting of me in order to feel safe and survive in the world. And I was able to hear the voice of my spirit, of my soul, more loudly, so that um, I could align myself with what wanted to happen that was in accord with uh, the truth of who I am. And begin to live my life in a way that felt more authentic, more whole, and allowed me to inhabit myself more fully. Um, so I'll stop here, and I'll just say that I think in the next video, um, I'm going to talk about how my need to course correct how I was living um, had benefits, but it also allowed me to learn a new lesson about um, taking care of myself. So stop here. Thank you for joining me. Blessings to all, and see you again.